Hello and welcome to Your Place, where we have lively and informative chat with highly successful auto dealers and industry consultants about issues shaping automotive retail. Hi, I'm Dennis McGinn, founder and chief executive of vehicle reconditioning and communications company Rapid Recon. We visit our guests at their place of business 3 times a month, engage in issues and news shaping the car industry. Today's guest is Jim Boldebook. Jim founded CPC, Creative Marketing and Management, in 1986, combining his advertising experience with hands-on experience of a car dealer friend. In the past almost 40 years, Jim and his CPC associates have worked in very successful dealerships and have seen some incredible changes in automotive retailing. Jim, welcome to Europe. Let's get to it. Jim, what about those early days in advertising when there was no internet? There have been some amazing technological advances. Can you give us some of your background?
Well, it's obviously a huge sea change from what was happening 40 years ago. Actually, I can go back even before that. When I was a young man, my mom worked for a Chevrolet dealership back in Springfield, Massachusetts. She was a billing clerk. And I always had a fascination with cars. I was always taking cars apart and putting them back together again. And I spent a lot of time hanging out at the dealership. And my interest in advertising was growing at the same time. And I noticed that back in those days, I believe it was about 85% of advertising was spent in the newspaper, in the local newspaper. 15–20% was thrown to the early stages of broadcasting. But the reason that was that usually the used car dealer in the dealership controlled the advertising, because most of the advertising was used cars and big full page displays and so forth. And of course, the used car manager would handle it because he would prepare the thing. The newspaper would then prepare the ad, and the used car manager would have to proof the ad and make sure that the numbers were right and so forth. There were no disclaimers back then. You could pretty much say what you wanted because we didn't have any regulation at that time. But most of the advertising, and the used car guys loved newspaper because people would come in with a newspaper folded under their arm and saying, "Hey, I just saw this car right here. Have you got it?" Like that. So it was just confirmation that they were doing the right things. And everybody was kind of afraid to put their toe into broadcasting at the time. Then a few brave souls did start doing it, and it took off. But I would say through the early 90s, the only thing that was going on was newspaper and radio and television. There was some direct mail, of course. It was outside billboards, signage and things, individual promotions. But for the most part, that's what it was. And as time went on, more of the budget went from broadcast into broadcast from paper. The paper kind of shrunk up. And then all of a sudden in the early 90s, this thing came along called the internet, and it blew everybody's mind, but nobody was really ready to jump in and spend any money on it. It was a free tote. There was some early social media things on it, but nothing of impact until the Facebooks of the world came along.
Jim, you've had some great successes over the years, helping many dealers reach #1 national status. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those successes?
Well, the first #1 success was with my partner in the early days of the ad agency. He was a Ford dealer development dealer where he bought stock into Ford. And he was a great guy with a great personality. The first day I met him, he shook my hand with his great big hand and said, "I'm Jolly John Pulsifer, the Polish Prince of Happiness." And that was my introduction to John. And I could tell that this guy was going to be a success with or without me. Because he just was 150%. So I started talking to John about my advertising background and what I knew about broadcasting. And he and I decided that we were going to put our heads together and come up with a campaign. Well, the store had a 300 car planning volume, which is 300 cars a year by Ford. within 19 months, he was doing 300 cars a month and became the #1 Ford Mercury dual dealership in the United States. And even more impressively, it wasn't giving things away, it was profit, because he is on record as buying out Ford Motor Company of the dealer development deal the shortest time in history. I believe it was just 2 years. He bought Ford stock back out of profit, because that's the only way you could buy it, was out of profit. So he did some pretty amazing things. And then from that, I got a call one day from a fellow by the name of Bob Tasca down in Providence, Rhode Island. And Bob was just complimenting John on what he was doing, because he was looking at his numbers. And so we started talking. He said, well, Bob was a legendary Ford dealer, and then he got out of the Ford business for a while, and then Ford put him back into the business with a Lincoln Mercury dealership down in Seekonk, Mass. And Bob said, well, why don't you come down and talk to us? And to make a long story short, because of their tremendous operation, all they needed was a little bit of advertising on the gas pedal, and Bob became the #1 Lincoln Mercury dealer in the United States in Seekonk for 2 years in a row. And then all of a sudden, I had the chance to meet Bert Bachman out in Los Angeles at Galpin Ford at a meeting in Philadelphia. And Bert said, why don't you come out and talk to us? And that was in 1991, I believe. And within a short time, we helped Bert push over that threshold he was at. He was #1 in trucks in the world, and we helped him with the cars and everything. So he became, for 20 years, the #1 Ford dealer in the world. And we worked with Bert for 20 years. And Bert is still a great guy. He's still alive. His son, Bo, runs the operation now. They're great people, a great dealership, and I learned a lot from them. So we had a lot of #1s. In fact, today we work with Brandon Ford down in Tampa, who has been the #1 Ford dealer in the world for the last 2 years. And that dealership is owned partly by the Docks Group, Ernie Breach's family. And Wayne Hammond runs the show down there, and he's done a great job. So those are our #1 accolades. But you know what? I just want to say one thing. It was not CBC. Advertising is only 15% of the equation. All the other things that the dealer does are the 85%. And good advertising will help a good dealer grow faster to where they want to be. Good advertising will help a bad dealer go to his demise earlier. So it's really the dealer. We just throw in 15% of the puff.
What, Jim, what do you think dealers should be doing with marketing planning today, looking forward?
Well, of course, right now at this given time, there's not much you can do in terms of pricing, because it's goofy right now. The prices are so crazy. And the factories are shipping all the high content vehicles through, and just at a normal MSRP without incentives, vehicle prices are up crazy. So pricing really isn't the issue today. It's simply, obviously, the availability of inventory, and that's very, very tough. And there's a lot of pressures that are coming on the dealer, not only from the chip shortage, but of course from the fact that now you have big public players like Carvana and Vroom and so forth, who are eating their lunch in terms of consuming a lot of the nice vehicles that are out there. But that's not the end of the world. I think what the dealer should be doing today, and I was speaking with Jim Lehman about this the other day, I think what is really important is that they get local in their thinking. Everybody is consumed with national metrics. They national surveys and national metrics, and this is what's happening. This is what's trending. Well, the reality of it is, even though the car business is the same all over the United States and the world for that matter, every market is a little different, and you will see dramatic differences sometimes as little as 20, 25 miles apart. And I think if a dealer thinks locally and says, how can I satisfy and serve and excite the market that's in my backyard within 20 miles or 30 minutes of a drive, and really work that market hard, they're going to have the greatest success, rather than trying to think globally about numbers that are coming that that are aggregate totals of San Francisco and Tampa and Houston and so forth. Hey, you know what? If you're up in Maine, and you're going to find out it's a completely different story in a little burg town up here than it is down in San Antonio, Texas, or Sacramento, California. And I think if you think local, you do more local research, you talk to your customers more, you do better dialogues with your customers and understand their problems, their ability to pay, what their price point is, and eventually you come into it. As to the actual what you're going to do with your marketing, the CBC agency has had a lot of success with digital, with using social media demographics to present used vehicles to specific target markets that are the most apt to act on those vehicles. But today, I will say that there's still radio and television still have a great opportunity because they still reach a very large portion of the United States. And you know what? You'll hear people say, oh, no, you got to be digital. Well, guess what? Carvana is advertising on broadcast. Facebook is advertising on television. So some of the biggest social media players are using broadcast. So it does have an important, and the good thing for dealers is that I think there's more opportunity now for negotiating with broadcast because broadcast knows that they've lost a lot of that business over the years to digital.
So, Jim, with everything that's going on in the market today, what I think you're saying is that stop worrying about the bigger picture and the Carvanas and CarMax and people like that. Just focus on your customers, your market, their problems, their needs. And if you do a good job there, you're going to be successful in your market. Is that really what you're saying?
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And, here's the problem that you have with a Carvana. If you're a dealer in East whatever, and you've got a small dealership, and your salespeople hear the Carvana ads or see the Carvana ads, or God forbid, one of their customers says, gee, I just got a great offer on my car from Carvana, it messes up their head because they're saying, oh, no, we can't compete with Carvana. Well, you know what? That's crazy. And it's going to get crazier because right now, Carvana is paying top dollar for vehicles, as are dealers paying top dollars for vehicles. But guess what? When that person gets paid off, they find out that they're going to have to spend at least as much in the difference for another car. So they're back in the boat. But what happens to these people 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, when they find out that they financed a car for 96 months or 84 months or whatever it may be, and you're upside down in 18 months from the date of contract, and they're just upside down forever? That dealer is going to become so much more important in working with that customer with local financing opportunities, something that Carvanas and Vrooms can't do. Because Carvana and a Vroom don't sit down with your customer face to face and take notes and are able to fight for you, I should say. I remember going to the opening of a CarMax in Atlanta with a JD Power group, and we were taking a tour of the dealership. And one of the dealers asked, this was, of course, a number of years ago, well, what do you do when a customer's upside down? When they're $1,800 or $3,000 upside down. And the manager at the time said, well, we're still trying to figure that out. And the dealer said, well, that's 80% of my business. So, car dealers understand that aspect from the get-go because that's what our business is all about. But when you say upside down, there can be an upside down and there can be a crazy upside down. And I don't know how that's all going to unwind, but I will say that I think the dealer has a much better opportunity of unwinding that down the road and helping customers than a large internet company. I have nothing against Carvana and Vroom. I think they're fine companies, and I think there's a place for everything.
Right, thank you for your insights. And,
thank you, Dennis.
Really appreciate your time today, and we will talk to you again, Jim. Thank you very much.